Beryl, a significant rain threat for the central and eastern United States, with more tornadoes possible as well on today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for July 9th. Beryl has weakened to a tropical depression. That was late last night, and it is still a 30 mile per hour TD right now. Still appears as though it is holding on for a little bit longer before it turns post-tropical, currently located near central Arkansas. Around the world elsewhere, there could be one or two glimmers of more disturbances elsewhere, but in the Atlantic, we're currently looking at Beryl on day 39 of Atlantic hurricane season. It is shifting quite substantially now towards the northeast. There's really nothing left on the southern side of it. It's all on the north, producing heavy amounts of rain which could cause flash flooding. It's day 53 of the Pacific hurricane season, and there's no areas of interest once again here. We just had Tropical Storm Aletta last week, and it was a very brief, weak storm. So it is a very underwhelming start to the Eastern Pacific season. Now in the Western Pacific, there could be one or two hints of further development coming up now. We have two areas of interest. They've multiplied. A 10% chance in the South China Sea, and now a 20% chance emerging near the Philippines for potential development. And in the North Indian Ocean, we have no areas of interest right now, but quite a lot of stormy conditions there along the coast of India. The monsoon season still in full swing in a few of those spots. And looking quickly to the southern hemisphere, to the southwest Indian Ocean, it's also relatively quiet. Just a few little storms off the Seychelles, out through the equatorial regions of the South Indian Ocean as a whole there. But not too much to talk about. Let's go on then to Beryl and its current position, which is just 3 kilometers from Glenwood, Arkansas, 46 from Hot Springs, 122 from Little Rock, 328 from Memphis, and 560 from St. Louis. At this time, the storm is moving quite quickly northeastwards. There were flash flood warnings we were going to tell you about, but they've just expired, and they were in areas around Little Rock. But continuing northeastwards, those position estimates will go out of date very quickly as we continue to watch the storm. Of course, now down to a depression. 30 mile per hour winds, estimated pressure 1005. Well, let's take a look at satellite imagery of the system then, and you can see it's still pushing and still producing high amounts of rainfall in those bands to the northern side. A very quick cut-off point to the western side of the system, but on the northern side and northeast there's a big trail of atmospheric moisture, and you may be able to just about spot the center of the system still there on that imagery. And we've just got first visibles as well as we throw it to radar here, and you can still see a few really chunky parts on that northern side there, and it looks like it's getting sheared quite a bit still as well, and lots of dry air intruding from the south side. Of course, Beryl is nearly done, but it is still going to be producing significant amounts of rainfall over this whole trail through the Midwest and out towards the eastern United States along the Canadian border and in Ontario as well, possibly up to 3 or 4 inches in a lot of those areas, and maybe isolated maximums of 6. But there we are with its general movement through Arkansas right now. This is a longer loop on how the storm's been devolving in the last, say, 12 hours or so. I believe there's still a slight risk for tornado activity as well today along the eastern fringe of the storm, but really it doesn't look that substantial when we're looking at the banding there on the right hand side, but you can't be too careful, I suppose. But certainly a severe weather risk continuing into today. Of course, not as big as yesterday where we had over 100 tornado warnings in the eastern part of Texas and western Louisiana. Here's a wider shot looking at the east coast of the United States in particular there, and off the coast as well. A few little storms off Florida and down into the Caribbean here, poking into the eastern Pacific. You can see a few little areas of thunderstorms across Central America. In general though, relatively quiet now. Off the coast of Africa, there's a little potent looking wave there that's just moving off the coast. That could be something to look at, although models aren't depicting anything in the Atlantic now for the whole period. And here's the Eastern Pacific, a few little waves moving on through. We're just looking for real signs of life. Will any of these start to push on and become a tropical cyclone? Well, not yet. Western Pacific, no real signs of these two systems that we're watching yet. It's later on in the forecast period. We should see the western system forms first, the South China Sea, maybe in about 3 days. In North Indian Ocean, lots of rainfall across the region there as well, of course, as expected, and into the Arabian Sea, a big bulk of convection and moisture moving off the coast into the Arabian Sea, and a few storms in Pakistan as well. So sea surface temperatures remain fairly warm, not much change since yesterday in the Eastern Pacific, over 30 degrees maybe in one or two spots off the coast of Mexico. Look at the Gulf of Mexico though in the Atlantic, extremely high sea surface temperatures extending from the eastern part of Texas through Louisiana and onto the coast of Florida. A few spots there approaching 32 degrees Celsius down the Keys and on towards the Bahamas as well. Really warm waters. Western Pacific also showing off a massive area of very warm temperatures too, just really inviting storm activity. 32 degrees in a few spots, even as far north as the Ryukyu Islands, the central Ryukyu Islands at that. North Indian Ocean also showing some decent temperatures there in the Bay of Bengal, pushing 30 degrees Celsius, and in the eastern part of the Arabian Sea also looking good. Compared to average, we're seeing a significant departure still in the Atlantic Ocean, but look at the Westpac. East of the Ryukyu Islands, south of Japan there, that little area, huge temperature deviation there, around 4 degrees above average. South China Sea also getting up to about 2 to 3 degrees above average too. And in general, the Western Pacific looking very good. Eastpac still has its warm spots as well, but it is generally a little bit more normalized there. And this is the oceanic heat content, really quite low values now in the Eastern Pacific. There was a little bit of a peak earlier in a few weeks ago, but it will probably come back a little bit, but not a huge amount of energy when you compare it to the huge amounts there in the Western Pacific, which is really showing signs that we could get some significant systems moving through there. Certainly the conditions are supportive. The Atlantic Ocean as well, even after Beryl, we still have this trail of very high amounts of oceanic heat content, mainly off Jamaica and off Haiti and through the Cayman Islands into the Gulf of Mexico. So let's check the GFS computer model then for the next 5 days. There's Beryl shooing off towards the northeast, could actually intensify slightly as it does so, turning post-tropical of course. It won't be a tropical storm again, but it could briefly produce tropical storm force winds over part of Michigan in the next couple of days, so they may require some kind of wind warning, but it won't be a tropical storm warning because it should be post-tropical by that point. What's left of it will eventually move through Atlantic Canada and possibly back out over the North Atlantic, although it will be barely recognisable. Here's the Western Pacific over that 5-day period. Look first in the South China Sea, you start to see this significant signature, and almost at the same time actually this second one starting to appear off the eastern side of the Philippines towards the end of that loop, and both of them in the 5-day period according to the GFS model become tropical storms. Other models aren't really on board with this yet, so our chances remain fairly low, but at this time I think we can foresee those chances are going to rise over the next few days. Regardless of tropical cyclone development, it's certainly going to be a wetter phase in the region now. Looking at the rainfall expectations over the next 7 days, take a look at your area if you're here, and you can see huge amounts of rain in a few areas there, extending well beyond 16 inches. That's 400 millimeters in a few spots. In parts of Samar, looking at towards 400 millimeters. Just off the southern tip of Mindanao, though, could get up to 600 or 700 millimeters of rain. And on the coast of Vietnam as well, we could be looking at 400 millimeters depending on what happens with that system. First of all though, in the longer range, we're looking at day 5 to 10 in the Eastern Pacific and potential for our next named storm perhaps, and maybe another one after that. Two systems look like they might start up here in the Eastern Pacific during that 10-day period. Actually no, it's going to be beyond that, I misspoke. It's just the one system in that 10-day period, although there is a little circulation off the coast of Baja as well. I was thinking about another one later in the run that you'll see shortly, but there's that one system becoming a hurricane hurricane there, moving out over the East Pac. Now this West Pac storm, really huge in the South China Sea, becomes a typhoon, and then a small one moving through the Philippines there, also as a Category 1 typhoon on this forecast, and moving very close to Manila, moving out over the South China Sea, and then a third storm out there in the open Western Pacific after moving through or close to the Mariana Islands. We have a bit of a parade on our hands there in the Western Pacific if the GFS model has its way. That first storm moving through Vietnam, hugging the coast for a fair bit as well. That's the serious stuff done. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Force 13 merch store, where you can take a look at all our items as well as our full season and individual storm animations at any time. And are still waiting for Hone t-shirt, which we've been waiting for that storm for 118 months. Well, in the silly range then, as I mentioned earlier, this second storm starting to appear through Central America. It's energy at first, and then the storm really builds in earnest when we get to around the 23rd, 24th of July, becoming a powerful hurricane there in the Eastern Pacific. It is a very long way out though, so I wouldn't put any weight on that forecast yet, but climatologically it really has to happen. It's extremely rare that we don't see any substantial hurricanes in the Eastern Pacific in July. It is prime time for things to really get going there. Western Pacific, these two typhoons that we're left with. The first one that was a small one moving through Hainan and then on towards Vietnam again, so two typhoons hitting Vietnam there in the space of a week, and then this huge typhoon blowing up further north and going on to affect Japan, the southernmost islands, Kyushu, towards the end there as well. It starts small at first, but it does a lot of rotating, and I think merging with another little system becomes a very large cyclone in quick succession, but it is in the very long range, so something we're going to have to watch over the next couple of weeks. On this day, something else that we were watching, and it was one of the big ones, it was Hurricane Dennis, which was rapidly intensifying as a Category 2 on this day. Of course, it would peak once again later on. I think its secondary peak was Category 3, if I'm not mistaken, before it made landfall as a powerful hurricane along the coast of, I think by that point it was Alabama, somewhere along the Gulf Coast. Very powerful storm from the historic 2005 hurricane season. It did more than what Beryl probably did in terms of its final landfall in the US, that is. Of course, Beryl was much more stronger in the Gulf, in the Caribbean. Back to today then, and Beryl were happy to see the back of it. It should be gone in just a couple of days, and then we'll produce our track animation of the storm. The next name in the Atlantic is Debbie, in the East Pac it's Bud, and in the Central Pacific it's still Hone. In the Western Pacific, our next name now is Gamey, and after that it's Prapiroon, in case we get two quite quickly. In the North Indian Ocean it is Asna, and we're still at 24 storms so far this year around the world. The average in a year is 92. And in the Southern Hemisphere, coming up the next season, Robin in the Australian region, Ansha in the Southwest Indian Ocean, and Pitta in the South Pacific. That's it from today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again, same time tomorrow.
Become an Ultimate Fan today.